How's it going, YouTube? What's up, YouTube? How's it going? In this video, I'm just gonna be giving you a little comparison. Basically, it's gonna be between MMORPGs, WoW, Guild Wars, and your action RPGs or your hack and slash kind of RPGs, which would be the fuck, which would be Path of Exile and Diablo 3. So you can kind of just clump those groups together, and it'll be kind of like how you can get the best out of each game and kind of a couple of my opinions. So let's just hop right into it here. So before I hop right into this, I just want to reiterate that I'm comparing World of Warcraft to Path of Exile, but it's kind of... It can be expanded to include other action RPGs with Path of Exile and other MMORPGs into WoW, but really it's from a WoW standpoint and a Path of Exile standpoint to really give you the two, I think, bigger hack and slash and MMORPGs kind of right into each other. Diablo is, I think, pretty big, but POE tends to be, I think, a little more popular just because it's completely free to play. Which leads us right into our first topic, which is price. World of Warcraft will cost you $60 to start up, and you get a free month with the purchase of the latest expansion, but you do have to, after that, keep up the $15 subscription fee every month. And I know it looks like a complete pitfall towards WoW, and you really just don't want to pay that much money, but what you get out of the game is completely worth it in terms of ongoing content and stable servers. Path of Exile is just, it's a little bit smaller, so I think, you know, that free to play is a good format for it. Let's move on here to player count. So at the end of 2015, there were 5.5 million subscribers to WoW. I mean, a lot of those obviously are people paying for multiple accounts and whatever you want to kind of throw in that mix, but if you look at that compared to a game like Path of Exile or Diablo, there aren't gonna be as many players in those action RPGs. It's substantially, like, there's a substantial difference in the amount of players, and it kind of adds a different aspect to MMORPGs. They have different realms, and they're for different purposes, and I think that kind of adds a different aspect to the game. It's really cool. It's a whole different way of kind of playing the game and getting into the game and playing with friends and stuff like that. It's not just one world, you hop in and that's it. There are role-playing servers, PvP role-playing, PvP and PvE servers in World of Warcraft. So it makes you think about it a little more. Also, those realms are split into alliance and hordes. So you have to pick a realm that you know will, if you play alliance, will be more alliance-sided. So that player count in World of Warcraft really leads to a different aspect of how you kind of get into the game, versus Path of Exile, which doesn't have as many players, so it's really just kind of one world, which I don't think is really a pitfall or anything. I just think that's an important topic to touch on. So moving into the actual physical world in MMORPGs versus your action RPGs. Obviously, in MMORPGs, the physical world is massive, and I mean huge. If you haven't ever really gotten into an MMORPG and really explored it, you really won't understand how big the physical world is. In World of Warcraft, there are, I think, 6 continents, and you don't run across the continent. That's not a thing. You actually would have to take a portal or at least fly to get across these continents in a good amount of time. Versus something like Path of Exile, you don't really worry about the world size, because as you're playing through it, you're kind of led into a path. So that world size really doesn't really matter, but at the same time, it's not big at all. You do take portals, I guess, but there's no really need to worry about the world size, like I said. So on to content. I'd like to split the content into endgame and actual things that you can do. As far as endgame goes with MMORPGs, it's substantially larger again. There are so many things you can do, and like I said earlier in the video, the raids are ongoing, consistently being released to the ends of expansions where you're waiting on the next expansion, so the last raid lasts for a longer time than other raids, but it kind of just keeps coming out. versus something like Path of Exile, at least that I know of. The end game isn't really just kind of growing your character and getting gear and, you know, fighting the boss at different difficulties and stuff like that. It's really just kind of using your build to the best of its ability. And you don't, in Path of Exile, you don't really hit complete endgame, which would be level 100, which is the max level. That's not something that a lot of people get to. So you kind of re-roll your character at 60, 70, maybe test out a new build or something like that once you've already completed maybe your level 70 character. So the end game is definitely bigger in MMORPGs as far as actual things, the physical amount of things that you can do. At least in WoW, there are definitely more things to do, as in maybe getting mounts, achievements, and getting transmogs at endgame, versus Path of Exile. The endgame really isn't much about, you know, looks or achievements. It's more about, like I said, the build that you've worked towards in Path of Exile and using that build and the best of your ability. So for the next topic is PvP, which is kind of ties into the end game. And the reason I kept it separate is because I wanted to talk about more of the competitive aspect of MMORPGs versus the action RPGs. In MMORPGs, PvP is huge, and it's so much more competitive. If you're a competitive player and you do like, you know, killing your fellow human, I would definitely go with an MMORPG. And especially if you look towards, you know, really like competing for money, the money is definitely going to be in MMORPGs. Path of Exile does have a PvP aspect to it. It's not that great. As far as MMORPGs PvP, it's way more smooth. And I mean, you can always go into WoW and Guild Wars streams if you wanted to look at PvP. It's just, it's an awesome thing to see something so complex happen so smoothly. Path of Exile and Diablo, basically kind of grouping up your action RPGs, I don't think their PvP is really on par. I think when you play those kind of games, kind of really just look at your character as how good it can do when you're farming, you know, that end game content. So as far as time that you need to put into each game to kind of get out of the game, you know, what would feel good when it comes to kind of end game and maybe PvP, you need a lot more time into MMORPGs versus your action RPG. The time that you put into an action RPG could be, you know, 2 hours every other day and just kind of work and level your character up to that end game, versus the end game in MMORPGs, like I said, are ongoing. They keep going. So if you're not really keeping up with the MMORPG, you're literally just going to fall behind in gear, and you're not going to be able to compete with higher geared players or higher skilled players that really keep up with the game. So again, I guess if you want to be a competitive player, you definitely need to have more time. If you don't really have the time, POE is definitely a great game to play if you don't have a lot of time. It's really just kind of a story mode, and you can kind of just put in the time that you feel like you want to put into it, and you can still have a lot of fun with the game. So the next topic, lore or backstory. World of Warcraft has books. Like everything that happens in World of Warcraft happens for a reason, and it leads into the next expansion. And you can see that with the leveling and progression of the game. You can follow the story. You're literally following a story as you level the game. You don't really see that kind of immersion when you play an action RPG. It's really just a video game. In MMORPGs, it feels kind of, it literally feels immersive when you play it and you kind of follow your story. So, you know, some people prefer not to do that, but a lot of people that really get into World of Warcraft, especially raiders, they love that storyline that comes with it. And so do I. I really like the story that World of Warcraft puts forth. I haven't really seen that in Path of Exile. Maybe I haven't done enough research, but I don't really see that lore or backstory with Path of Exile. And I'm not saying that when you play Path of Exile that there isn't a story to it, because there definitely is. I just don't feel the immersion that I do with World of Warcraft. And that leads us kind of to our next topic, which is depth. And I'm just talking about depth in rotations and, you know, actual buttons, and depth in gameplay and what you can kind of do with your character and how you can change your character up if you get bored. So when it comes to depth of rotations, World of Warcraft and MMORPGs have insane amounts of depth and rotation. Like, especially in WoW, you have probably 3 or 4 main damage dealing buttons, plus any other mobility buttons, buffs, crowd control. I mean, the list goes on for characters in WoW. When it comes to your hack and slash style of games, the depth in your rotation is just kind of working towards one build, which is maybe 1 or 2 main damage dealing abilities, and you really try to buff that or work around those abilities, so it kind of lacks that depth. As far as depth in gameplay and like what you can actually do with different characters, honestly, for each is huge and immense. With MMORPGs, each class, has its own play styles, and within those play styles, you can choose different, maybe like, for example, in World of Warcraft, you can choose different talents inside that spec. So the depth, it definitely goes way in there. As far as Path of Exile, they have a passive talent tree, which is massive, and you can go any direction with that talent tree. So if you wanted to play, let's go with a Crusader, that's when you first start out, you could go into intellect or more of a spell casting role with that. So our next topic is about how the world is kind of organized. With MMORPG, it's definitely literally an open world. You can go anywhere at any time, and it doesn't really hold you back. When you play a Path of Exile or Diablo, it's much more linear. You're following, it's like Call of Duty. You're following a story. Granted, you can see the map in Path of Exile versus in Call of Duty, you're just kind of going where it tells you to go, but it's the exact same thing. In Path of Exile, you're just kind of following where it tells you to go, and that's really all you're doing. They do have in Path of Exile kind of missions in different areas and like optional quests and stuff like that. So it is still open world, but it's a much more linear style of an open world versus in World of Warcraft, you can literally walk anywhere at any time. Granted, you may die or literally just can't get somewhere because you need a portal to open up, but you can see my point. So leading into our next topic, which would be graphics. It's not, for me, graphics aren't a big deal. If I wanted to play a game because of the graphics, I wouldn't be playing any role-playing games. These tend to be like comic book style graphics. But I will say that the graphics in Path of Exile are actually amazing. Like, you wouldn't think for a free-to-play linear action RPG to have that good of graphics. You just wouldn't think it, but the water looks amazing. Versus maybe World of Warcraft, the graphics are fine, and the abilities look really cool and stuff like that, but they're not mind-blowing graphics. They look like they should, is a good way to put it. So, I mean, if you want to compare World of Warcraft versus Path of Exile graphics, they definitely both have good graphics, and I don't think I want to lean one way or the other there. But to kind of sum it all up, they're both really, really fun, and they're both definitely worth playing to the end. And when I say both, I mean MMORPGs and action RPGs in general should definitely, at least, like, if you think you want to play a game, you should definitely get into WoW and play until level 90, level 100, until that max level to really get what it would feel like towards the end game. If you don't play to max level, you really won't. You'll just know World of Warcraft for the questing, and that's all you'll understand. And that's kind of the same with Path of Exile. If you don't play towards the end game, all you'll understand is that linear questing that they give you, when the end game is actually different. So you definitely want to give the time towards each style of game, and I definitely think it's worth it. I've played WoW and Guild Wars 2 towards end game, and I definitely played WoW in depth at end game. And Path of Exile, I'm working towards. I'm actually currently playing, so I think it's definitely worth the time. And both games are definitely still in depth in their respective ways. When I say in their respective ways, I really talk about Path of Exile. It's more in depth when it comes to kind of gameplay and how your character can really work and kind of turn out towards the end. Your build is very, very individualistic. You can gear it towards wherever you want. So you know, the depth definitely isn't lacking, and there's much to learn in each game. They're not shallow. So if you really just want a free-to-play game, and you know, you don't really have a lot of time to put towards it, Path of Exile is definitely a great choice. If you do have the money, and you're definitely looking for a new main game, a game that you just want to get into and really work towards, World of Warcraft is great. And I wouldn't shy down just because of the monthly subscription. So those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like, and you can subscribe for more. You can watch me live on Twitch TV or stream me, and those links will be down there in the description. And again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.